Hello, everybody. Welcome to the third episode of Blue and Spencer versus the MCU, in which Spencer, my co-host, and I watch MCU movies and then talk about them. Pretty simple concept. One day I won't explain it anymore. Spencer, how you doing?
I'm doing good. How
Awesome.
about you?
Uh, it's hot out, and the it's just I'm tired. Like it's been a long day.
I feel that.
But other than that, pretty good. Um, ready to talk some Iron Man 2. Uh,
Iron Man 2 will be interesting.
I unlike the other two we've covered, Hulk and Iron Man 1, which if you haven't watched those episodes, highly recommend. They're pretty good, only about an hour and some change long. Uh, I haven't watched them, but I also talked for like an hour in them, so I don't really need to. But unlike those two, I actually really enjoy uh, this movie. I did as a kid, and I do now. Um,
Nice, nice.
Rewatching it was a real nostalgia trip for me because I remember as a kid watching the movie over and over.
That's cool.
What about you? Any? Because I know you said you really liked one of them. It might have been Hulk.
How you're feeling about what you're describing is how it was for the first Iron Man. I
Yeah,
do like two though. Two I do enjoy. I think I'd argue it's probably an underrated MCU movie. Uh,
absolutely.
but yeah, I enjoy it.
Yeah, I mean it really holds up. Um, but uh, we'll get into that. We're not the. I feel like we've played our hands too early here, but
Let's get on with it.
okay. So it starts off in Russia. Um, the media is covering Tony Stark's big reveal that he is, in fact, Iron Man. Um, and a dying old man, on Anton Benko, who formerly worked for Stark Industries, dies, but not before giving his secrets to his son, Ivan Benko. Um, and those secrets consist of the arc reactor, which is the big source of power, the MacGuffin for the Iron Man films as of now. Um, but Finko makes just starts building his own, uh, as a reaction to his, not really a reaction to his father's death, but as a motivated by his father's death, he starts to build his own from his father's plans. Uh, 6 months later, um, Tony Stark reveals the Stark Expo, which is something that his father did back in the, I don't think they ever say, probably 60s or 70s, back when Howard Stark was still around. He did the Stark Expo, and it's this big conglomeration of science and innovation for all the world. It's a year-long celebration, and he kicks it off, shows some footage of his father, and talks about the legacy of, legacy just in general. Um, then as he steps away to let his the footage of his father play, he reveals that the palladium core of the arc reactor is slowly killing him, which is not what you want. Uh,
Iron Man's dying. What? No, it's too early for that.
how are we gonna do the rest of the MCU and make a fucking Marvillion dollars? That was stupid.
More villain.
Yeah,
Wow.
that was dumb.
That was a real low right there. Okay. I have no words after that.
Yeah. Nope, that's the episode. Canceled. No, I'm kidding. So, Tony, basically, the Palladium core is killing him, which is bad. We don't want that. But he still needs to use it because it powers the suit and also keeps him from dying. But now he's dying because of the thing that keeps him from dying. I hate it when that happens. Um, During this time, with the expo. Oh, hold on. I think I missed something. Oh, he also gets subpoenaed to go before the Supreme Court. Um, to basically like the government is trying to pressure him into giving them his suits, which he's like, no, I'm not gonna do that because they're gonna
Yeah,
weaponize them.
I actually really like that scene.
There's a lot of scenes that are really. I hesitate to use this word, but it's cluttered, it's hasty, and it's just filled with this it's emotional, it's tense. This movie does that really well. As a kid with a lot of undiagnosed stuff, these kind of fast-paced scenes where it's all like one continuous thing and it's all building up used to give me actual anxiety. I didn't know it was anxiety, but it worked because I was like, 7 watching these movies. This okay, maybe not 7. That doesn't sound right. I would have been 7. But I'm a young kid watching these movies, and they're tense and they're like, it's really good at just stirring up the emotions. Uh,
Agree with that.
Great scene. Uh, but basically, they're pressuring him. Uh, they showed this footage of. Well, they try to show footage or like images that prove that like foreign enemies are trying to replicate the suits. So Tony, being the show off he is, um, hacks into the court's uh, TV, and like shows off. Basically, no, they're not. One of them is too big and falls over. One of them ends up killing a whole bunch of people, and then he pulls up one. And I forgot to mention this. Justin Hammer, who is now the military contractor, who's kind of the anti-Stark. Um, I'll get into that. I have a lot of thoughts about Justin Hammer. But he's there to testify against Stark, and during the time where he is where he's like that, where they're showing this off, Stark shows that Hammer is actually also trying to replicate the suit, which ended up in someone getting injured. Uh, and it turned into this whole hectic thing, and Stark basically he turns to the attending and is like, I have privatized world peace. I'm doing everything, you know. I think he's like at my own pleasure, and then makes a stupid joke, but it's really good because it shows that like yes, Tony Stark has improved from the last movie, but he's still or the development he got in the last movie is still there, but he's still the same show offy dick. Um, and it works. It I mean it's Tony Stark. Uh, so
I definitely agree with all that for sure.
yeah,
Well
this
said.
movie. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just saying it was well said.
Yeah. I really like this movie, and like while the last two I was kind of um the last two I was kind of like I'm just watching it and I'll develop thoughts as I talk about it. But this time I was like actively like, oh, this and this. Like I almost like wanted I almost like tried to go and seek out like a notepad so I could write stuff down. It was like this movie has a lot to it, and I um we'll get to that. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself because I really like this movie. Anyway, Tony Stark's dying. He just went to court and showed off, um, and so he chooses not um to not tell anybody, but then appoints Pepper as CEO, which is another very tense scene where they're like arguing, they're bickering. It's very dynamic. I thought about this while watching it. It's a very dynamic scene. Tony is constantly moving around, and it's going. This leads into a point I'm going to make later. This movie kind of starts. It kickstarts seeing Tony as not as human, as fallible, because it shows him struggling with his mental health, which they really get into in later movies, but this one really does well to set it up. Um, but it's a very tense scene. Tony's moving, doing stupid shit, and it just ends, and Tony going, "You be CEO." And Pepper's like, "Okay." And then we cut to Tony and Happy sparring, um, which is a fun scene. This movie does so well with the relationships. Like Tony and Happy get dialogue together. Um, uh, um, Rhodey, Don Cheadle, because in this movie they replaced Rhodey from the last movie. I
Yeah,
really like their chemistry together.
he definitely does a better job.
Absolutely.
But yeah,
Um, like that was something I noticed as soon as we got to the Congress scene where Rhodey shows up. It's or
hmm
the Senate. It's like they're talking, they're riffing. It genuinely feels like they're friends and not just two guys in a movie together. Anyway, so during the
for sure.
sparring, uh, Stark hires Natalie Rushman to become Tony's assistant. Natalie Rushman, of course, being Scarlett Johansson, who turns out to be Black Widow. I'm just gonna say it. Whatever. It's 2024. If you haven't figured that out by now, you have something else going on. But they replace Pepper with Natalie, and yeah. Then, um, because they can, they go to Europe. I'm not sure if they ever say why they went to Europe, but now they're in Monaco. Cool. Uh, During the scene, and I have to mention it because it's so funny looking back. It's like it ages really poorly. As they're like walking through this restaurant, they run into Elon Musk as himself, and it was so funny because like I saw that I'm like, oh, it's him, it's the Twitter man. Like I lost it because he's just kind
Twitter
of
man.
he's just there, and it's a really funny cameo, and there's like really no reason for it. And looking like now we know like oh man, Musk. But it's so funny. I lost a little bit at that. Um, but anyway, they're
I
in.
kind of forgot about that cameo before watching it again.
I vaguely remembered Musk showing up in an Iron Man movie. Vaguely, I thought maybe I was wrong and it was someone else. But then seeing it, I was like, oh, I was right. Yes. It was. It's not as funny as I think it is. Um, I really enjoy this. I thought it was funny. Anyway, so they're at the Monaco Grand Prix. And after having another tense conversation with Hammer, who was talking to, I believe, the reporter that Tony banged in the last movie. I think that's who it was supposed to be. Um, but Justin is with her, and it turns into them talking about Tony, of course. Justin gets all upset, and then Tony sneaks off checks his blood toxicity for like the palladium poisoning, and it's like, you got any other stupid ideas? Anyway, so then he goes and replaces his driver for the Grand Prix that they're at. So now he's driving a race car, and everyone's like, oh, what the fuck, Tony? Um, and then during the race, he is attacked by Vinko, remember him? Who is using two electric whips. It's a really cool scene. I really enjoyed the action scenes in this movie. Um, During the scene, Tony puts his armor on. We get to see the suitcase armor for the first time, which I always liked the suitcase armor. Uh, we see it. They throw down, and in the end, Tony wins, but is like severely beat up. So, you know.
That's probably my favorite part of this movie. I like his suitcase like suit there, and seeing him go into it was cool.
Yeah.
And kind of like the whole point to where Whiplash was, the whole point that he's sort of like getting to for why he was attacking Tony there was very interesting too. I'm trying to remember the like line exactly, but something along the line of like,
When you make God bleed,
the people stop
will stop.
believing or something like that.
Yeah, it's
And so
which he says that in the next scene, where they meet, and this is really where you start getting into like, oh, this guy's not fucking around. Is Tony goes and goes and sees Venko in prison, and they talk about like they talk shop a little bit, and then, you know, you get the line, if you make God bleed, people will stop believing in them, and then there will be blood in the wall. He kind of goes on a tangent, but it's imagery, and it kind of it foreshadows a lot of what does happen to Tony in later in the MCU, which could be my over analytics, but I I really like that scene. It's I mean, yeah, like that's his motivation. Is he doesn't really want to hurt anyone per se, except for Tony. He wants to strike right at Tony's heart and like watch him burn. Like it's a really cool scene that very much elaborates on a lot of the points that they both stand for. Because in a lot of ways they are similar, but I will get into that as well later. Um, anyway, Justin Hammer, the douchebag he is, decides to break Banco out of prison and hire him to upgrade the suits that they made. He wants to be better than Stark. There's another really good line that they say here, and I can't remember it off the top of my head. Um, Hold on, I'm reading through something. What was it? It's something that Hammer says. Do you have any idea what I'm talking about?
no, I was just trying to think. I'm not 100% sure.
He says something cool, which is the coolest moment he has in this movie. Moving on. So now they're working together. Later in the movie, because I'm reading off the Wikipedia article because I'm a consummate professional. Later, uh, very important plot first. Vanko specifically asks for his bird from Russia. He has a bird. It's a whole thing. He has a bird in Russia, and he asks Hammer for the bird.
Bored.
For the bird. I went by bird. Yeah, I went by bird. So he has a bird. Justin Hammer goes to get the bird. Anyway, later in the movie, Vanko is working on the robots, and Justin Hammer notices that he's working on drones instead of robots. And Justin, this is also when he brings him the bird. It's a different bird. It's not his bird. It's a whole thing. I wish this was a joke, but it's a whole thing where he's like, "This is not my bird." And Justin Hammer says, "Hey, don't get so attached to things. Learn to let go." And then Justin's like, "Hey, these aren't suits. These are drones. I wanted suits." And Vanko's like, "Hey, Don't get so attached to things. Learn to let go. And Hammer's like, ah, fuck you. Um, so they're not buddy buddy, but they're all right. Anyway, so later during Tony's birthday party, he gets drunk in the suit. During this time, Rhodey is trying to convince, the Department of Justice that uh, Tony can be trusted with the suit. Shows up to his party. He's drunk in the suit. What the fuck? Um, Pepper tries to get Tony to calm down. It doesn't work. He starts shooting. He starts blowing shit up. And Rhodey decides to put on a suit. Um, so now you got Rhodey in the Mark. I think it's the Mark II. They say it later in the movie. Rhodey in the Mark II, Tony in his armor, and they throw it down. And it's a really good scene. Um, in my opinion, I really liked the scene of Rhodey and Tony fighting. It looks cool. It's again, it's very dynamic.
I think it shows its good purpose of showing the differences between them. Because while they are friends at the end of the day, they obviously sort of go about thing things different ways, right?
Yeah.
Uh, I'm
No.
trying to think of like a better word for it here, but yeah, and so
Yeah. No, I can see that. They definitely had different fighting styles. Um, but it's still a really good. Uh, it's really good. Uh, that's it. That's my entire. Anyway, so the fight ends in a stalemate because they repulse for each other and it turns into this massive explosion. Um, and so um it ends up in a stalemate and Rhodey gets away with the armor. Um, and he goes to the military and they're like, okay, cool, let's weaponize this, which we all knew was gonna happen. This is why Tony didn't give them the fucking armor. Uh,
yep, yep.
we then cut to Tony in a giant donut, which is very important for me to mention
Giant
because
donut. Yep.
then we get Nick Fury show up, and it's really funny to me that when you realize this is one of his the first line of his first proper appearance is, "Sir, I'm gonna have to ask you to please get out of the donut." But um, so they talk. Natalie Rushman is revealed to be a Shield agent, and Tony's like, "Whoa, that's crazy." Um, they they being Nick Fury and Romanoff give Tony an injection that won't cure his palladium poisoning, but will make it manageable. Um, they Fury explains that like your dad knew a way that he could do this with the arc reactor because that's not the full technology. Um, he was a founder of Shield. Then he explains that Vonko's father, Anton Benko, um, worked with Howard to invent the arc reactor, but Benko tried to sell it, whereas Howard wanted to use it to improve the world. Um, Super cool. So Anton gets deported. The Soviets are like, "Oh, you can't make an arc reactor? Go to Gulag." Uh, then Fury gives Stark some old stuff of Howard's, um, and basically puts him on house arrest. Um, later, not later. It's anyway. So Tony tries to get to work, and he finds in his dad's um, old stuff basically the start of a trail of crumbs that leads him to believe that there might be a new element. His father might have discovered an element that will help him stabilize his heart, or his arc reactor. Um, so Tony, uh, for some reason, goes to visit Pepper. Uh, that gets him nowhere, except he finds a diorama of the Stark Expo from 1974. So it wasn't 70s, I was right. And so he takes the diorama home and he scans it, and it turns out that it is actually uh, a it's an atomic structure of the new element. Um, so he just rediscovered an old element, or a new element. Then they do some work with, I think they called it a prismatic accelerator. I think that is specifically what they call it. It says particle accelerator, but I'm pretty sure they said prismatic in the movie. I'm like 12% sure. Because I went, that's not a thing. That's not true. What the fuck is a prismatic accelerator? Anyway, so he uses it to synthesize the new element and puts it in a arc reactor and then like sets it aside to run tests. So it's completely untested. Um, then Vanko calls Tony and they talk for a little bit. Tony almost gets his location but isn't able to. Um, then basically they have like a little back and forth where Anton or Vanko's like, "Fuck you, I'm gonna blow shit up." Um, oh, a little bit early, I forgot to mention this. God, this Wikipedia article actually fucking sucks, dude. I'm just gonna go based off of memory. I'm sorry. Uh, I don't know what's wrong with the Wikipedia article. Someone needs to fix that. So right before this, Hammer calls Vanko and is like, "Hey, I need a demonstration." But Vanko's like, "I can't. I can do a presentation, not a demonstration. I can make him salute." Because Hammer was meeting with the military. He was fucking golfing. But, so Hammer comes back to the facility and is like, basically takes his bird, takes his shoes, takes his pillows, and is like, "I want my fucking robots, dude. Like, I brought you here to make robots. You're gonna make my fucking robots." And then stations two guards to stop him. Then he kills the two guards and calls Tony. That's, I mean, important. So now they have beef. Um, Tony realizes that Vanko is going to attack the expo, which Hammer is presenting at, and plugs the untested core with a previously unknown element into him, and then just flies off. Which, sure, Tony.
Sounds safe.
Let's just throw the scientific process out the window. So we go to the expo where Hammer, in a scene very reminiscent of the opening scene when Tony introduced the expo. They're very similar, but one is a lot more lackluster, which kind of mirrors them, which I'll get into. Um, Hammer unveils the new drones and then unveils the War Machine, which is the suit that Rhodey stole, equipped with a bunch of weapons. Um, then Stark shows up and is like, "We gotta get out of here. All of these people are in danger." Lo and behold, danger starts. Then it's just this massive, it's a long collection of scenes, but Widow goes to, or Romanoff goes to the Hammer facility where Vanko is to stop him, while Tony and Rhodey fight off the drones. We get a scene that everybody knows in some capacity, which is a little kid using his like homemade light up like arc reactor and points it towards one of the massive robots, which aims its shoulder mounted cannon at it, and then obviously he gets saved by Tony Stark, and then it's revealed years later that that's Peter Parker. So we get that scene. Um, we continue. They fight robots. They end up in this like garden area. It's like Japanese inspired. I kind of liked it. It looked cool. Um, then Vanko flies to Tony and Rhodey, and we see that he's built his own armor. They fight. I think this part of the fight, or this part of the fight was kind of lackluster. It didn't go on for as long as just fighting the robots, which I mean, like, isn't
Yeah, I agree.
isn't terrible, but like it's Whiplash. They could have done a lot with that fight, and they just didn't. Um, I'm not mad, just disappointed. You know,
I very much agree.
it was just
Because
very
I
short.
feel like
Go ahead.
um, no, I was just gonna say though is too because it's like with him having the armor, that kind of goes beyond him just being Whiplash because of also like the whole like because I think like because of him also being like Crimson Dynamo comic stuff, and so
Yeah,
and I've always found Crimson Dynamo to be like a cool character in the comics. Still, a little bit I've read of him,
right.
and so uh, and so I care a lot more for Anton as Crimson Dynamo than Whiplash, and so like it was just very like uh, for me, I was just like I wish we could have gotten more proper respect to that part of his character.
I never caught that. I'm not gonna lie to you. I, huh? I never caught that because I knew he was Crimson Dynamo, but I figured like, oh, they just wanted to add a Howard, Tony, Anton, Ivan mirror, like not
Right.
foil. It's what's the word? Like narrative
No,
reflection. Hold on,
I'm not quite sure. I don't know what you're getting to, but
narrative reflection.
I think I get the idea of what you're trying to say though.
Yeah,
A mirror, like I don't know.
whatever. They're mirrors of each other's.
Hmm.
They're very similar, but I could see that. I'm mostly just like because technically in some iterations of Whiplash he does have armor. I told you I had an image ready. This is the image. Like they could have done this armor. It wouldn't have been as cool. Putting it on the screen for y'all to see.
Hmm.
They could have done
Right.
this, but now that I've kind of put together that we're also trying to do Crimson Dynamo, it kind of makes sense. It's just like I never considered that. Interesting. That's pretty interesting actually. Okay, cool. I never considered that. Um, anyway, so we get this very lackluster fight between the Whiplash Dynamo and Tony and Rhodey. Uh, they win. Hammer's arrested. Um, Vanko. They don't kill Vanko, but he blows himself up in all the drones because why not? Um, we get Pepper resigns as CEO, giving it back to Tony. That lasted so long. Pepper, great job. Uh, then in a debriefing with Fury, he basically says, "Okay, we're gonna make you a consultant for this program that we're not gonna name yet." Um, and then Tony and Rhodey are honored for what they did. And it's really funny because the guy that presented it is the same guy that Tony has been like beefing with the entire time, some like fucking Department of Justice asshole.
It is so funny.
And so we get the scene of him putting the pin on Tony, and he pricks him, and he goes, just goes to show how annoying a little prick can be. And it's just so fucking. I really liked it.
It's that part was great.
Yeah. It's not. I feel like I mentioned a lot of shit that's not important to the plot at all in this one, but also there's a lot of details in this movie that really make it more humorous. I like it. Um, but then we get an after credit scene where Coulson finds a large hammer in a crater in a desert in New Mexico, which obviously hence foreshadows sets up the next movie in the MCU, which was Thor, which we'll be talking about next time. Uh, and so that's the synopsis. Um, what are your overall thoughts about the movie? I know we both said we liked it, but like
Yeah.
overall impression, what do you think?
I mean, I don't know if I have much more to add on than what I was saying earlier, but like it's definitely one I like. I definitely think it's better than I think people give it credit for.
I agree.
I'd say. I mean, it's definitely like not one of my favorite MCU movies. It's very like ranking them and probably be mid somewhere. Um,
I can see that.
yeah, I was
I
just trying to think. I'd say I like. I'd say I liked it more than Hulk. I guess I don't know. They're very close. I'd say because I definitely think both are early MCU movies. I definitely think there's appreciation to look towards it. Looking back on both of them, and uh, also I think this movie kind of this time I think because I think this is like the first time I watched it since several years.
same.
Anyway, point I'm getting to is this one also got me made me appreciate John Favreau a little more as a
Oh, John
filmmaker.
Favreau is fantastic.
Seeing him, just like, well, I mean, I say this in the way of, well, obviously we know we've had Mandalorian come out. That was a massive hit that's come
Yeah,
out. He's directed some episodes, and so like, uh, and just watching more film stuff, knowing more about like people's styles and stuff, like, I could very
yeah,
much see a lot of his styles in some of the places. Like there's one part of in everyone knows like that whole like explosion walk away thing, right? And that was a huge thing in the first Iron Man where we see, Tony Stark has his back turned to where he's like first showing the big like bomb demonstration or missile
oh yeah,
demonstration,
like
right?
when they're on the
And so
racetrack and Whiplash has it. Yeah,
right, and so we get a very right there we get a very like mirrored sort of thing, but for Whiplash.
yeah,
And so there's just a lot of different things where there that I was like, okay, yeah, this definitely has like a very Favreau feel around like different parts like that.
yeah.
Where, but I definitely appreciate it. I did notice too. This movie has an interesting um during a it's a lot more prevalent in the first half of it. It has a very interesting like passage of time of where it's not a movie that necessarily where all the events take place within like a day or something or
I mean,
a
not
week
many
or
of them.
something. It's a lot of I don't know necessarily how long, but you could tell the passage of time, especially between like the first few scenes and the next scenes with his infection.
Yeah,
Because like in one of the first scenes, it was like what 6 or 10%, something like that, 12%, and then it raises to like next scene 50%. And so,
yeah,
very interesting to see
yeah. We get
how the
a
time passes by
tangible.
through a lot of it.
Yeah, we get a tangible idea of time moving as opposed to
Hmm.
some movies where it's just you know okay, these things are
Hmm.
happening.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And one other thing that I mainly want to add is that I really liked or something I appreciate now with even more looking back on it, and something that I miss about, I'd argue about a lot of the modern MCU. I'm not saying that we don't have it; it's just not as obvious. Is the how there's a big plot point in it that's not what do I want to say? Like, while it is a big part of the plot, it's not necessarily like uh okay. What I'm getting to is we have like Nick Fury and
Yeah.
uh Black Widow introduced, right? And
Yes.
it serves an important part of the story, uh and of what's actually going on in this movie, but obviously, we know that it has a wider implication across everything, right? And for the MCU leading into Avengers. And while we do have these plot points in other modern MCU movies, they're just not really done as well, I feel like.
You're
And
talking
so
about like
how it ties into other things with it not
how
necessarily
throughout the
popping out,
movie.
with it more being more interweaved into the plot.
Yeah. No, they definitely have. They did actually. They did definitely. They talked a lot about how like there's other shit going on. Um.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree with you.
Something I miss. Um, just having it all tie in so well together.
Yeah. The early MCU was really good about that. I'd say it
Yeah,
was
for
more
sure.
subtle in its crossovers. Um. Like not even crossovers, but it's just more like it's more subtle. The modern
Mhm.
MCU is very much like okay, these things are happening. We're gonna do this next. Woo! Like, but back then it's like, hmm, these things are happening.
It was a lot better feeling naturally connected than I'd say it is now.
Yeah, yeah, it felt natural. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, those are all pretty good points. I'm with you on that one. Um, so I kind of have two main ideas of discussion that I think um one of them I'll be able to like go forward and talk more about, but the mirror of Anton Vanko and Ivan Vanko with Howard Stark and Tony Stark, but also just them as characters, but also how Justin is kind of like a bad reflection of Tony. So for first off, we have the Vankos. Both of them are living in destitution. Both of them spent time in prison. They have every reason in the world to want to help people and like make sure nobody else goes through this. Instead, they want revenge. Um, Whereas you have Tony and Howard, born in the lap of luxury, very easily could have just been massive assholes. But instead, they help. Or not, okay, Howard didn't, but Tony is actively helping people. Whereas Ivan, who has every motive to help people, is actively going for revenge. Um, I thought that was something that just kept sticking with me is like they come from opposite circumstances where they should have been in each other's positions, but that's not where they are. And that's just something I thought. I don't know if I'm making any sense to be honest.
I get what you're getting at.
Yeah, it's just it's interesting. Um, I don't know.
It does a good job of like I never like I've seen that like I can the mirrors make sense, but like it's I definitely I like that plot point.
Yeah,
I definitely think your explanation of it's made me appreciate it a little more. Uh, Very interesting seeing how we have these parallels of sorts between the ages and whatnot.
yeah.
You know,
Um,
so,
but also the whole thing with what's the word with Tony and Ivan both being geniuses. Um, they very much are Ivan is very much the dark reflection of Tony, and I think we get a lot of that in these movies. With the first one, we get what's his name, Stain. Stain is this is Tony if Tony didn't have morals, which he didn't in the first movie, but he had the capacity for it. Um,
Mm.
Stain is just bad. He wants to monetize war, and it just turns into this gross. He he turns to wanting to kill Tony to keep war going. And then we have Vanko, who had nothing but still um used his intellect to be bad and to hurt people, which resulted in um Tony needing to die, which is something that Stan and Vanko had in common, is their own shit, their own bad evil motives stem from Tony and the Stark family. Um, but then we also have Justin, who looks. I think you'll see where I'm going with this better. It looks Justin Hammer acts like Tony. He's trying to replicate Tony's success in being charismatic, um, and a bit eccentric. But one thing that definitely separates them is Tony is actually charismatic and eccentric. When he's alone, he's still the same weird dude, But Justin Hammer, we see many times during this movie, he's underneath that, you know, $1,000 suit and the fancy watch. He's just an asshole with money. Um, we get the scenes where he's screaming at Venko. We get the scene where he's just an asshole. We get when uh Rhodey kind of like sees through him and is like, what's wrong with this guy during the demonstration scene. I think I forgot to mention that. There's a whole scene where he shows off weapons to Rhodey, and Rhodey's just not having it because he's just acting like Tony. And when he's not getting the reaction that he wants, he starts to falter. It happens when they meet Monaco too. When the attention turns to Tony, he starts to falter and he starts to go, "No, I don't want this. The attention needs to be on me." One scene, which it's such a one-off, but when he's on the stage demonstrating the robots, when he doesn't say like, okay, yeah, take the podium. He goes, get that out of the way. It's not like because he thinks or because he knows that no one is scrutinizing him at that moment, he's just a dick. He had no reason to do that, but he did. And it really shows that he's putting on this facade of trying to be like Tony, and it's just not working.
For sure.
Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think simply put, like, he's just kind of jealous, I guess, of Tony, right? Like he
Yeah,
wants to be like him. He wants to strive for success, but he obviously just isn't as good as Tony. We
yeah,
see him try to. I think that's shown really well in that Congress scene, right? Tony hacks the thing and he starts showing other places struggling to try to do what Tony accomplished, saying sort of like the fallout from Iron Man 1, which is, I thought that was great. But anyway, we get to that one part right as when Hammer's turning it off, where you actually see him messing with this like drone that's like messing up, right? And
yeah,
so just showing that versus, we see Tony do it first try in a cave. So,
yeah. No, I agree. It's it's very much like he doesn't he doesn't have the same
mhm.
what's the word shit um he doesn't have the same charisma. He'd like to, but he doesn't. Um, and it's very obvious that he's not Tony, and he'll never be Tony
Hmm.
because he just doesn't have
Right.
what it takes. And it
For
also
sure.
when he immediately starts getting mad at Venko for making drones instead of robots, he immediately becomes angry. Or not, he doesn't show it, but he's angry. He's not like, hmm, maybe, because we saw earlier that the last time he tried to build a suit, someone got hurt. There's always going to be the
Yeah.
capacity for human error, but he never like processes that. He just goes, no, I don't like it. This isn't what I want. He wants what he wants, and when somebody presents a better option or does it better, he gets angry, and it he's like, okay, he's like, let me try and put this. So Tony has both the genius and the resources. Ivan has the genius but not the resources, and Justin has the resources, but he's a dumb as a box of rocks. It's just they really these two antagonists blend. They work together really well as an antagonist for Tony because put together they counter Tony, but because of their own like bullshit and inability to work together, they fail.
It's true.
Yeah,
I never looked into it that deep of like how they're well, I say like both are opposites of Tony in different ways, but it makes a lot of sense.
yeah. I'll end up saying this quite a bit, but I very much I very much have like an overthinking type thing.
No, I think it's great to try to look at how certain characters fit together.
Yeah,
No, I think sometimes that'll help explain why certain
yeah,
characters work together, or I think even it'll help you appreciate what maybe the writer or writers was working towards originally.
yeah. No, absolutely. I think once we get more into me trying to defend certain Marvel movies, it's gonna come in handy. But for now, it's just kind of like I'm thinking about it too much because I will have to start defending stuff. Man, wait till we get Eternals. I'm gonna be like, we're gonna be fisticuffs, hand to hand. Anyway, I do have a second point, which is this movie is very much the start of Tony's descent, mentally. So the first movie, obviously, he's like a little messed up because he was in a he got kidnapped, put in a cave for months. Obviously, he's gonna be messed up. This movie, other than the obvious stuff, he's fine. It's been 6 months of unprecedented peace. But he's anxious. You can tell. You might not be able to. I really don't know what your thoughts on this are, but you can tell he's anxious. You can tell he's bothered. He's not 100% altogether. Um, there's the scene where they're discussing and he's moving. Discussing with Pepper, he's moving. He's anxious. He can't stop for even a second. Um, there's there's him becoming reckless. You can tell that he's starting to put his own safety on the back burner because the alternative is to stop and consider how he is. And we get more of this as we move further into the MCU. Um, but it's very interesting to see started.
It makes a lot of sense. I mean, obviously, in watching this, I could tell that he was distraught in some ways.
Yeah,
But I never really thought about how much it connects to the overall MCU, and it makes a lot of sense.
yeah. It's I don't know. It's something that I've definitely thought about. Is um Tony Stark uh absolutely has mental issues. Um,
Hmm.
even but like, and I will get into it more as we see more of Tony. Endgame wrap it wraps up the overlying subplot of Tony's declining mental health in such an interesting way, and in a
Hmm.
tragic way. Tony is a tragic hero in all this, um, but for now, it's
Hmm.
interesting to see that the subplot start and the decline start to like he's starting to crack more so than he already is, which I thought was interesting. It's something I will definitely talk more about.
For sure.
Do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, not particularly from this movie, but I think it'll be great to examine just Tony's journey in general, because I think that's such a huge part of what made the first three phases of the MCU great, because we're able to follow the singular character's journey.
Yeah,
And while he wasn't necessarily the main character of, say, Phase 3, I mean, because he didn't really have like a main,
line movie.
well, like he didn't have a main movie to like, we didn't get an Iron Man 4 in Phase 3, right?
Yeah,
But he played huge roles in other movies in Phase 3. And so for any fan, we had in like so many of these movies this one character that we could follow across, or arguably there's more than just Tony, obviously, but he was, I think, the one with the most appearances, like out of the main character of main appearances in these movies.
he's
It's easiest
definitely
to,
one of the most
yeah.
prominent movies. He's there.
Yeah, so like, point is, his journey is easy to follow along to really help connect to these first three phases of the MCU.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to get technical about it, and I'm not, I take this with a grain of salt. It kind of feels like you could say that the first, like within the parameters of the first, what is it, phase three, the first three phases up to Endgame, you could say
Hmm.
Tony is the protagonist. He is the main character
I, I,
driving everything forward.
I think you could say that overall, right? And
Yeah,
and
because
and I think that
obviously,
even gets into, and I think that even is kind of shown in the phases in general, right? Because the only movie after Endgame in Phase 3 is
Far From Home,
from Far
which
From Home,
is
and that very
spec-
much deals with the fallout of no Iron Man.
of Tony dying. Yeah, and obviously every movie has its own protagonist and its own storylines, but the overarching narrative, the one long thread going from now to Endgame and even Far From Home is Tony, and it's something to think about. You could say
For
Tony is the
sure.
main character of the MCU. He's the one that started it all, and he's the one. Okay, I won't say he ended it all because we do have like a billion more phases to get through. But
Hmm.
it's something to think about.
For sure. It will be cool to dissect more of his journey as we get further
Yeah.
into the MCU.
Oh no, definitely. Tony's descent into mental instability is something I feel very. I mean, not like very strongly about. I'm not just sitting here going, Tony, Tony. Like that's not at all what I'm doing. We haven't even gotten to my like favorite. This isn't. To be fair, we haven't gotten to my favorite MCU movie. At least within like the first three pages. Stayed wait, dude. Within the first three phases, we have not gotten to my favorite movie. Um, so obviously I'm not too worried about Tony, but since we're on the third fucking movie, it's pretty Tony centric. Um,
For sure.
but it's definitely something that is something we'll elaborate on as we continue. Um, do you have any like overarching points you'd like to talk about?
Um, I do feel like this, not specifically for Iron Man 2, but I do have something that I think would be worth bringing up now, because of it with Justin Hammer. Um, since supposedly he's going to be in coming back for Armor Wars, which is going to be
Oh,
interesting.
I didn't even think about that. I'd like to see that.
Uh,
I would love to see him come back.
and very interesting too, because that would be a more roadie centric movie as far as main character we'd follow, and
I think it was always going to be Rhodey's movie.
yeah, well, yeah, roadie's movie. Originally, it's going to be a show. Now it got upgraded to a movie. That kind of is like,
I
I feel like
think
it's kind of one of those movies just put on the back burner right now, but like it's
I think
supposedly happening
I think what they did is they
still.
put and um Ironheart and Armor Wars together and then made it a movie for like
I don't.
I
Well,
don't
those
know.
two are very two different things, and so
Are they?
um,
I will
yeah,
just
because Ironheart is Ironheart's an interesting situation because they have that film that might go some reshoots.
do
There
they have
it
it filmed? I didn't know that.
that's there's a couple shows that they have filmed that they're maybe reevaluating,
Yeah.
um, and that's one of the main two. The other one, that Agatha show, and so
Nobody wants to see that. I'm saying right now, if they put that out, no one's gonna watch it.
it's,
But anyway,
I don't know.
I think
I
the
don't know.
Ironheart will
MC is
definitely
not in a great state, and so
no.
that's the reason why I think they're kind of reevaluating it. Ironheart, I think, has a cool premise,
What's the premise?
but doesn't really relate to this much. It's going with the idea of technology versus magic because you have the hood is like the main villain of that.
That's really weird.
And so I actually kind of like the idea, and I did enjoy Ironheart and the
I do
movie
like
she appeared
Ironheart.
in.
I also
So
I have read Ironheart comics, so but what I'm
interesting.
thinking is Ironheart in the comics. Obviously, there's very little. They might not do this at all, which honestly would kind of ruin the character for me. Is Ironheart has always been connected to Tony. Um,
Yeah, it's very interesting because
so had they
Ironheart
not,
in the MCU isn't at all.
yeah, I was gonna say because they changed that. Now that I'm thinking about it, it really wouldn't make sense for her to show up in Armor Wars. But I would
Hmm.
like to. I would have liked to see her there. I always figured that she'd be a part of that. But now that I'm thinking about it,
Sure.
there'd be no reason because they kind of just didn't do that, which is really disappointing because I really like Ironheart in the comics. Like I didn't dislike Wakanda Forever. I actually really love Wakanda Forever. I'm not a fan of how they portrayed Ironheart.
Gotcha.
But
Well, we
yeah,
will get to that when we eventually get to
Justin
it.
Hammer. I kind of look forward to seeing Justin Hammer again. He's a good he's a good bad guy because he's just kind of a hapless doof with a lot of money. Like
I guess so. Yeah.
he kind of has no reason being an antagonist, but he is, and we love him. But
It's funny.
there's there's some good ones. It's a good movie. It's a good
Who
movie.
knows when Armor Wars will be out though? So
2030.
2030. Yeah, that's what it freaking feels like. 'Cause they keep on saying like, trust us, it's gonna happen, but like, there's
Oh
only so
no,
much
no.
time until Secret Wars is gonna happen. So
Yeah. I
it's
we
meant to be
we
a sequel to Secret Invasion and Ironheart.
Iron Wars?
Hmm. Yeah.
Maybe we'll see some Tony and Ironheart. Anyway, I'm just gonna say this here because it kind of relates to that, and I will go more into that as we get into Phase 4. The MCU should have ended at Endgame. That was the end of the MCU.
Oh boy,
But
boy,
we'll get into we'll get into that.
yeah. There's a lot to get into there as
There's a
far as
lot to
what the MC is
unpack.
doing right now. But now is not the place to get into that.
No,
Uh,
no, I'm
so
absolutely with you. But what we will get into is what would you say your ranking is for this one?
my ranking for this one,
Yeah,
like a
your
letter
tier list.
grade.
Yeah.
Um, hmm.
So for context, we have Iron Man 1 in A and Hulk in B.
I'd put this in B as well, but just higher for me.
I'd I'd put it in A. It's it's severely underrated. I hear no one talking about it, but it's so good. Like,
I do agree it's underrated, and I do enjoy it more than Hulk, but I can't say I think it is near for me the quality of Iron Man 1.
I, I mean, quality. There's so many different ways you could interpret that. I mean, like, from a technical standpoint, it's really good. You know?
Technical standpoint. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think each of them have their merits. The first one clicks a lot more for me with me, but the second one I do enjoy it, and like I said, it's better than Hulk, I'd say. Yeah,
Okay,
it's
we'll
a
put
solid
it in
watch.
B. We'll put it in B. We'll put Iron Man 2 as a high B, as like a B plus.
I can I can but yeah, sounds good.
I see your points. I just disagree with them. But yeah, I mean, any closing thoughts?
uh, I mean, I really don't feel like I have much more. Um,
Yeah.
I guess it's cool to see Whiplash be a villain, I guess, because like I consider him really like a bit of a smaller villain overall. Um,
He's very not A list.
yeah, like he's a very I'd say B list, I guess. I wouldn't put him quite C, but definitely like a B list, I'd say,
Yeah.
villain. And so it was interesting to see him have a spotlight in this movie, and I
No,
think he
absolutely.
definitely had his moments. Even if I wish one of those was a bit better. But
The ending fight.
it was cool.
Yeah,
Listen,
yeah.
man, there's Crimson Dynamo. That's yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't know.
Oh well. So
Good movie altogether. I love this movie. I
good movie, good flick
I genuinely I remember why I liked it so much as a kid. It's really good.
for sure.
I really have nothing else to say.
Yeah, I agree. I think that does it.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of Blue and Spencer versus the MCU. Um, I'm not gonna say next week, but next time we're gonna be talking about Thor. Sorry for the very strange like gap in episodes. A bunch of stuff kept coming up, and I just because of how life is, I don't think I could promise weekly. But
We get to it when we can get to it.
yeah, it's fun. I like doing it, but um,
Hmm.
I like um,
It's been good. It's been good so far.
yeah,
Three in, and I think
three out of three without much
I'm
progress.
happy with how it's going so far, and it's
Yeah,
good
yeah. I like it. I mean, we'll get more out when we get more out, but until then, thanks for joining us for another episode, and we will see you next time. Bye bye.
laters.